everyone. So for day 3 of my Valentine series, I thought I would show you this card that I made using the new Cute Chemists stamp set by MFT Stamps that was just released as part of their January 2019 release. And we're going to make this cute little Cute Chemist card with a blue-violet background. So to start, we're going to stamp our images onto the page using a Copic-friendly black ink. The ink I always use is Memento black ink. And then we're going to stamp the 2 little scientists and some hearts above them so that it looks like there's just this big cloud of love and affection and I guess chemistry that is emanating out from them. And then to keep that feeling going, we're going to have our background just look like it's this big smoky haze of just the love and affection that these 2 little chemists have for each other. So we're going to have our lightest shades towards the center of the scene and then surrounding the 2 little scientists, so it looks like they're surrounded by a halo of love. And then we're going to darken it out as we get to the edges of the scene with some darker blue-violet Copic markers. And the way that I'm applying the ink, I'm kind of touching my pen to the page and moving in a little bit of a circular motion. I'm trying to leave the impression that the air around them is just kind of smoky and foggy and hazy. So I don't want my lines to be precise. When my colors blend into each other, I want it to blend in a little bit uneven so that it keeps up that effect like there's just this smoky, hazy background behind our 2 little scientists. And the background that I'm demonstrating in this card is a lighter version. It uses less color than the turquoise version that we'll take a look at the end of this video. So if you like contrast and you want your background to be even darker, then as you're coloring in your scene, just have your darker colors creep closer towards the middle of the scene. And then that's a way to add some contrast to the scene if you don't want it to be as light as it is in this video. I tried to do a lighter version just because the first version I had done I thought was pretty dark and I just wanted to try something else out to see how it would look. I try not to do the same thing twice. I would get bored if I did that, so I always try to tweak things a little bit if I'm going to do it a second time. So I'm just continuing with my shading, and my general approach to shading backgrounds is that I will go over the entire scene once with my lighter colors, and then I will work my way backwards. So I'll start going lightest to darkest, and then when I go to apply the second coat, I'll work backwards and apply darkest to lightest, so that this way we'll have at least 2 layers of ink on the page so that our colors will appear to blend smoothly, and we'll make sure we have enough color on the paper. So I'm being careful here as I'm coloring to try to not leave much color around the hearts, because I do want that part of the scene to appear light, because we do want it to look like there is a light emanating from the 2 little chemists and from their little love potion, I guess, that they're making up together. So I'm just going to keep working on the shading here until it kind of looks good to me. And we're getting close. And then we'll start coloring in the hearts. And I'm going to color in the bottom hearts in dark reds and then use medium toned reds for the next layer of hearts. And then we're going to complete our little our hearts with some pink shades as we move up towards the top of the page. And I just thought it would be fun, instead of just having hearts all the same color, I thought it would be fun to kind of make them, I don't know, kind of like ombre colored, but not really, because we're going from red to pink, just to give it a little bit of interest and make whatever potion they're making, make it look like it's really, really funky and interesting and special. So for this, I think, you don't have to have these precise colors. You can just use whatever colors you like in this area. Now we're going to color in the skin tones on our little chemists. And for the boy, we're going to use darker skin tones. So I used E30, E31, and then E34. And I'm focusing the shading on the right side of his face because that's farthest away from the potion or the explosion. So that would be the part that would be in the shadow. And just like with the background, I'm going to apply at least 2 layers of color just to get the blend looking good. And we're there. So now we're going to move on to the little girl. And for the little girl, we're going to make her fairer in complexion. So we're going to use E00 for the base, and then E13 and E11 for the shading. And we're going to focus the shading on the left-hand side of the page or the right-hand side of her face, depending on how you want to see it, just because that's the part that is farthest away from the little love potion that these two are creating. For the little boy image, if you want practice making hair or shading hair, this little boy stamp is excellent for that exercise. I found it was very, very easy to get very realistic shading with my markers just because of the way that the pieces of hair are drawn in. So when you're drawing hair, you are going to use a flicking motion starting at either end of the strand of hair and then working towards the middle. And you're going to have your darker shades have shorter strokes, and then your longer shades, or your lighter shades with longer strokes, so that you get this appearance of having a little bit of a highlight towards the center of the strand or towards the part of the strand that is convex when you're looking at it, which would be the part that would have the highlight. So this is a really excellent stamp set to practice shading hair if you're interested in doing that. For the little girl, we're going to try to make her have brownish auburn hair. This one I found was a little bit more difficult to get a good hair blend because I think the strands of hair are so thin. So we're just going to use some E25, E29, and then some E19, which is going to add the auburn highlight for the little girl's hair. And then for the potions, I'm going to use a bunch of different colors. So we're going to make one of the potions pink. The glass part I'm going to color in with BG10 and then shade it with BG13. And then we're going to have a little blue potion, a little green potion. I pulled out my fluorescent green Copic marker for the green one, which I don't use that often. And then for the shoes, we're going to color them E25, E29, and then E27. And we're going to color them both the same color because we're going to end up putting the sentiment over their legs, so we're not going to see a lot of the shading in this area. For the little boy, I thought I would give him some blue jeans, and my favorite colors for making denim with Copics is B91, B93, B95, B97, and B99. You don't have to use all of them. If you want the blue jeans to look lighter, you would use the lower numbered 90 series, and if you want them to be darker, you would focus on the 95 to 99. For him, I kind of used all of them, so I guess he just looks like he has a mid-tone blue jean. For the little girl, we're going to color in her pants with some BG 75, 78, and 72. And coincidentally, those are the same colors that I used for the background on card 2, so we'll talk about that a little later. For the lab coats, I want their collars to be stark white, so we're not going to do any shading on the collars, but on the parts that are on the outer edges of their body, we're going to add some shading with C3, C1, C00, and then the colorless blender towards the middle, just to make sure that we get everything blended nicely together. For the clipboard, I'm going to use my toner grays here. Those are my favorite colors for trying to recreate metal, and we're going to use a combination of T2, T4, and T6. I also added some little scribbles with a 0.1 size Copic multi-liner to the clipboard just to make it look like there's some writing on there. And then for the ground, we're going to use C5 towards the outer edges, C3, and then C1. And here my C3 and C5 markers were kind of dying, and I should have probably got up to re-ink them right away, but I struggled a little bit. As you see here, I don't recommend it. You can ruin the tips of your markers by pressing too hard. So as soon as you see that your markers are kind of not giving up color, just go re-ink them. Save yourself some grief. So now we're going to add some shadows underneath the feet of the two little chemists. And I'm going to add that with C7 and then blend it out with C5 and then C3. And we're going to keep kind of the center of the scene a little bit light because there's going to be some reflection from the chemistry experiment that is kind of going on between these two. And again, a lot of this, the ground is going to end up covered up by our sentiment, so we don't have to be perfect here. I'm just kind of working to get an even blend with the darker colors focused towards the outside of the scene and then underneath the feet of the two images. And now we're done with the coloring, and now comes the fun part. We're going to add all the little bubbles, all the little, I guess, the chemistry experiment that's going on between these two. So to make bubbles, we are going to start by just dotting our colorless blender onto the page. And to get different size bubbles, it's just a matter of how hard you press or how long you allow the ink to flow out from the colorless blender. So if you want a tiny bubble, just quick dot the tip of the marker and then pull the marker away. If you want a bigger bubble, just hold the marker on the page for a little bit longer. And when you're making bubbles, you want to make sure that your colorless blender is completely filled up. Otherwise, it'll be really hard to get bubbles on the page, or to have the ink kind of be absorbed or pushed to the side, however you want to think that the colorless blender works. So I put a whole lot of bubbles in my background. You don't have to do this. You could just have the bubbles kind of centered in the center, kind of going up from the two little chemist heads and then up towards the top. But I like making bubbles, so I just put bubbles all over the page. To add some depth to the bubbles, we're going to add a little U at the bottom of some bubbles in either B45, B41, or BG000 or BG10. And you just want to do this randomly. And the reason that we're doing this is because we're going to go over those bubbles that have a little extra ink spot in them with our colorless blender. And then when it dries, it's going to give the bubbles depth. So for the darker inks, those bubbles are going to look like they just have a lot of depth, like they're big and kind of just ready to pop. And then for the lighter shades, they're just going to look like, average run-of-the-mill bubbles. Maybe they're like at their midpoint lifespan. They're not quite ready to pop. And then we're also going to have those little bubbles that we just went over with our colorless blender, and they're going to just kind of fade into the background. So they're going to look like they are further back in the scene, whereas the bubbles with more color are going to kind of pull to the front because they just have more detail and dimension. So that's kind of the trick to making the bubbles look like they're kind of surrounding or kind of in 3D around the scene. And then to further enhance the effect, we're going to add some highlights with a white gel pen. We're going to just put some little dots and dashed lines on our hearts. And then we're going to add some little specks, little dots with our white gel pen to some of the bubbles, and then a little C shape also in some of the bubbles, just to put a little reflection in the bubble, bring them to life a little bit more. And then we're just going to add a whole bunch of little random light white dots all around the page. And these are going to look like really, really tiny bubbles, or maybe like they're bubbles that have just popped. And again, I like to, whenever I add my white gel pen to the scene, I like to think of this part as adding the magic to the scene. And for these two little chemists, I guess there's a lot of magic in their scene. Then we're just going to add some highlights to them as well along the faces of the two little characters, and then we're done. We then take the painter's tape off of the card panel, and then I stamp my sentiment off screen using a banner die by MFT Stamps, and then some white embossing powder for the sentiment that says "Our chemistry is explosive." Then we'll add some glossy accents to the beakers to make them look like they're glass, as well as to the hearts, just to make them stand out from the bubbles. And then here is the second version that I made with the blue-green colors. And then the only difference here is that I use blue-green instead of purple. So I use BG78, BG75, BG72, and then in the very upper corners, I use B99 or B39. Either of them will give you just a little bit dark of a blue up in the corners if you want to do it this way. So those are my two versions of this card, everyone. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope that you give the Cute Chemists a try. You'll have a lot of fun, and anyone that you give this card to, I think, would really love it. I would love to hear from you in the comments as to which version you liked better. And that's all I have for now, everyone. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.